Hello, everybody. Mr. Foley here. Today, you are watching a recording from the Foley basement. Very exciting. We got the wood stove in the background. We've got the, what is that? Telescope. How exciting. Today, we're looking at supply and demand, and supply and demand impact your days tremendously. We may or may not realize it, but it's true. Everything that we buy, there are certain reasons why companies produce as much as they do. And, we act in a certain way in terms of what we demand as consumers, people who buy things as well. So we're going to start out by going through supply. As we go along, you can fill in your notes. There's a lot of spaces open in the charts. And I'll try to do a lot of the same scenarios I talk about in the notes, but there may be some that, you don't have, and that's okay. If it's different in the notes, just think it through, see if you can figure out an answer there, and you can always ask if you have a question as well. So here we go. Let's start it out, shall we? Okay. So important note, when we look at supply and demand, we're looking at both goods and services. So we could be talking about pencils being made, or hamburgers, or it could be having your hair cut, or having your tires rotated, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's a good, sometimes it's a service. Sometimes we forget that services are a part of it. So I thought I'd add that in. So the first one we're looking at is supply, and please fill in your definition for this. The amount of a good or service that producers are able and willing to sell at various prices during a specified time period. So there's a few key components here. Number one is the amount of good or service that producers are able and willing to sell. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. They have to be able, they have to be willing. And next, at various prices during a specific time period. So at one point in time, how much do they want to sell for? $1, $2, $3? And what we normally find is this. Let's see if I can make these fancy graphics work here. If the price of a good increases, oh, that's beautiful. Companies usually want to produce more because they can make more money. It makes more sense. However, if the price of a good decreases, dun, 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 they don't want to make as much because they don't make as much money off of it, which makes sense as well. And so we're going to look at these ideas in a little more detail here. So the law of supply and demand, let me move this over, is a positive relationship. And that means as prices for goods increase, usually we see the quantity supplied also increase. If prices for goods decrease, we usually see the quantity supplied decrease as well. So let's think about this. You are the Mars company and you produce Snickers candy bars. Who could use a Snickers right now? I always could. They're so good. How much does price affect how many units you desire to produce? So let me erase this here. Excellent. Okay. I just drew a dot. Let me get rid of that. Perfect. So here we go. Price point number one. A Snickers candy bar costs $1.25. So let's say you want to make 1,000 of them at $1.25. Now you can only sell Snickers for 50 cents. Do you still want to sell 1,000? You probably want to sell less, right? Because you're not going to make as much money on them. And so a company is less likely to sell something if it costs very little, which makes sense. Snickers costs $3. Ooh, that's big money. You better believe that the Snickers company can sell candy bars for $3. They're going to want to produce a lot because there's a lot of profit to be made. So prices go up, they want to sell more. Prices go down, they want to sell less. It's a positive relationship. So the key concepts we talked about here. The first one is willing and able. Able. It's not always possible to produce more goods or services in the short term. Think about avocados, for example. If there's a big fitness fad where everyone eats avocados, there's going to be real high demand for avocados, and it's going to increase prices. If prices go up, you probably want to produce more avocados, but there's a clear problem there. You have to grow them. And so you can't automatically say, I'm going to double my avocados. Well, that doesn't happen. You have to wait for the growing season. So you have to be able to produce more first. Second, willing. Sometimes people don't want to produce more. I know my dad was a small farmer here in Ellsworth, and he had the opportunity when milk prices were good to increase the size of his farm. But he wasn't willing to do that because that meant he'd have to change how he farmed. He'd have to get more loans and more equipment and cows. He didn't want to do that. And so sometimes companies just simply don't want to increase and get bigger. So let's say that you're going to grow more avocados. Well, what are the costs of doubling the amount of avocados you produce? You may need to buy more land, you may need more machinery, you may need more workers, and all those things add up. And so it's not just about can you do it, it's about do you want to. And businesses get to make those decisions. That's the beauty of capitalism. So moving forward, what changes supply? What's going to shift the amount of goods that we want to create? So we have two things that we're looking at here. First is change in quantity supplied. So if we have a change in quantity supplied, this occurs because there's a change in price. So we're looking at the Snickers cost 50 cents, the Snickers costs $1.50. You're just moving on a line. At this price, I'll produce this much. At this price, I'll produce this much. But then you have change in supply. And this is when producers will supply more goods or fewer goods at every price point. And it's not caused by a change in price, but by what we call determinants of supply. So we're going to look at that right now. So these are going to be determinants of supply that don't move along the line. They shift the line in or out so that at all price points, you'll produce more, or at all price points, you'll produce less. Hopefully this makes sense as we go along. Here are your 5. We'll go one at a time. The first one, let's get that out of the way. I just keep getting in the way no matter where I go on the screen. Okay, the first one is change in the cost of factors of production. If the prices of natural resources, labor resources, or capital resources used to produce a product increase, supply will decrease. When the cost of production decrease, supply increases. So basically, if the items you need to make a good or service cost more, you're going to supply less of that good or service because it's more expensive to make. So situation number 1, the cost of steel doubles. Imagine you're producing cars. There's a lot of steel in cars. If the price of steel doubles, what happens to your final costs? Well, your final cost goes up. So you don't want to produce as much. Situation 2, minimum wage increases to $15 an hour. This is a very similar situation. If your workers cost more, it costs more to create the car. So let's say that it was $5,000 to create a $10,000 car. Well, now with minimum wage increasing, it costs $7,000 to make a car. Instead of making $5,000 profit, you're only making $3,000. So you don't want to produce as much because you're not making as much money. You're able to buy the property for a new factory at half the cost you expected. This is where we see supply increase. If it costs a lot less to make a good, you're more willing to buy more because you make more profit with each one you make. All right, changes in technology. New technology often reduces producers' costs, leading to an increase in supply. So if you have new technology like robots that are more efficient, they help you to make cars at a lower cost, you're going to increase supply because it costs less to make them. You can have more profit. However, if your new technology leads to problems, machines break down, you're constantly fixing them, they're very expensive, then that technology might actually lead to a decrease in supply because it's too expensive. So it just depends on the situation you're facing. Third, change in profit opportunities, producing other products. If producers expect to make more selling something else, the supply of what they are currently producing decreases. If profit opportunities producing other things decrease, more sellers will begin producing this product, increasing supply. So for this, think about Apple, okay? Now I have the little CD there, let's scratch that. We're gonna go with iPhones, all right? This is an old Bondi blue iMac. Man, I even remember having one of those, had like 500 megabytes only. All right, well, let's think modern day. Let's say that we can either create computers or cell phones. Well, for Apple, if cell phones are selling for a large amount of money and computers aren't selling for as much, they may decide to increase supply of cell phones because they can make more money off of it. And with the opposite end of that, they may decrease supply of computers because there's not as much money to be made there. They can shift to something else. companies do this a lot. If they have two products they can make, they're going to go with the one they can make more money on. Maybe you have a clothing company, and during the pandemic, they decide to make masks because they can sell more and they can make more money off of them. They'd switch from clothing to masks. It's kind of what we see happen. Next one, taxes. Ugh, I hate taxes. They take all my money away. It's no fun. But we need them because we need roads and we need other good things that government provides. So I guess I have to live with it. Taxes change how much profit can be made. Increasing taxes usually decreases supply, while decreasing taxes increases supply. This is a simple number scenario. Let me see if I can use my fancy tools here again. Okay, so we're going to make a text box. Let's say I am producing, what am I going to produce? I'm producing cars, okay? And normally, when I sell a car, I can make $3,000 profit. Well, now we have an increase in taxes. Dun, dun, dun. And I have to pay more taxes for my workers. So that tax increase adds $500 to my cost. I put negative 500 because we're going to have to take $500 off of our $3,000 profit. So now, oh no, I only make $2,500 profit. That's not so great. So taxes, if they go up, usually you see supply decreases because people can't make as much money. However, if it was the opposite, let's say that now taxes are shifting and I don't have to pay that, well then profit went up and I'm back to 3,000. Maybe I increase production again. So it depends on the situation what you see with taxes. Okay, next on our list, we're just going to skip those because we already talked about it. Change in the number of sellers in the market. More sellers in the market usually increases supply. Fewer sellers will decrease supply. This is pretty straightforward. If I have one car dealership, the supply is going to be lower than if I have 4 car dealerships. It's a no-brainer. So Pontiac, you don't see them around anymore because the car company went out of business. If Pontiac goes bankrupt, they go out of business, what's going to happen to the supply of cars? Supply of cars is probably going to go down for a little while at least because that company is gone. If a new company comes in, and when Tesla came into the market, supply of cars went up because we have a new group in the market. Under Armour. When I was younger, back in 1422, we didn't have Under Armour, and we had less options. When Under Armour came into the athletic clothing market, the supply of athletic clothing increased dramatically because they started producing a lot of clothing. So you see those changes there. More sellers, more supply, less sellers, less supply in most cases. So, holy moly, we're done with supply. I do have, if you go in the E3 section, there'll be an E3 supply practice quiz. That'd be worth stopping right now and trying it out. I give you a PowerPoint, and the first slide has an example. You choose, do you think supply is going to go up or down? Click to the next slide, and I tell you the answer, and I kind of explain why it does what it does. So I'd say try that out. It's just going to be 5 questions. See how you do, and then you can come back for the second part, which is going to be on demand. So that's all I got for now for this desk supply. If you have any questions, let me know. And video number 2 will focus on demand, which has to do with you and I and the things we want to buy each and every day. Have a good one, everybody.